Okay, so today I'm going to talk about a topic that is obviously present in everyone's minds right now. I mean, those of us who live in Florida, we deal with this every year. It's hurricane season, and this year, not just for us Floridians, but for our brothers and sisters in other states, it's been a very eventful year already. Many floods, tornadoes, and other natural disasters. And when I picked the topic, was over 2 months ago, I think. I mean, many of these things had not happened. But it's unfortunately very timely that I'm going to talk about this. But it was a challenge as well for me to try and bring, the spiritist view of those events. And every time we go to the codification, it is always amazing to see how much wisdom the spirits bring to us, and they invite us to look at our worldly events in a very different light. And I'm going to invite you to do that today with me. Whenever we think about natural disasters, right, the first impression, the first memory that comes to us is something of suffering, violence, destruction. And what I'm going to invite you to do today is I'm going to pose a different hypothesis. The hypothesis is that natural disasters represent, as with everything else in God, a demonstration of utmost intelligence and love from God. Difficult to see that when we look at the destruction. But we're going to try and look at the problem in a different way, to see how much, again, love, justice, and intelligence is behind this grand plan. And it is a grand plan. And I was thinking to myself, boy, this is the smartest marketing ploy that I ever seen. How can this be a marketing ploy? Well, what is a good marketing strategy? And I'm going to be calling on you. So you guys are going to have to help me. So what is a good marketing strategy for you? When you see a good ad, why is it good? Sorry? The transformation. What else do you see in a good ad, television ad?
A happy feeling.
A happy feeling. Is it memorable? It's memorable, right? You can forget, right? It calls your attention. Does it cost a lot of money to do a good ad?
Yes.
Sometimes it does. But sometimes you see some pretty smart ads with, not so much investment. So I want us to look at this and start thinking differently. So let me try and do this with you today. Okay. Again, there's going to be many queries today. I'm going to be, quizzing you on different things. So, looking at this list of, I know they are not happy things, but what do you think was the main cause of discarnation in the 20th century? Infections? Wars?
Natural disasters.
Natural disasters. Okay. Keep those thoughts in mind, and you'll be amazed. First of all, a little bit of information. I didn't know that. 4 billion people discarnated in the 20th century. We all have to discarnate, and that's just a number of people who left this world so that other 5 billion people could actually come into this world. Some of us, right, who could come and incarnate. But here's the interesting statistics. 95% of those who discarnated because of these causes here: heart disease, infections, respiratory disease, and cancer. So this is a silent calamity, right? So those things are happening every day. As a matter of fact, 6,000 people will discarnate during this presentation. And it better be not you, because don't you quit on me, okay? I need you here, and pay attention. But but we don't hear about this, right? So you have 95% of people who discarnate, and we hear about them if, of course, they are friends and family, acquaintances of ours. We obviously hear about. But if they aren't, we don't hear about this mass process that is happening. It's silent. It doesn't call any attention. It shocks many of us because we know people, right? But it doesn't shock us as a society. Wars, actually, is still representative. 5% of the population discarnated because of war. So that's 200 million people. It's the size of some of our home country, Brazil. And surprise, natural disasters. Only 5 million people, or 0.1% of the population in the 20th century, actually discarnated because of natural disasters. It's a very small, tiny fraction of the population. Very, very small. Still, everyone remembers. We all remember all the major natural disasters that have happened. Does the market employ? Because it calls our attention. It doesn't, quote unquote, cost a lot of lives, but it's very effective in bringing a lot of things together, and I'm going to talk about those things that the Spirit explained to us. Why is that nature, why is that God, the spirits, let this happen? And actually, it's part of the natural laws, but they happen for a reason. So here's just to remind us of some of the largest natural disasters in history. I was surprised to learn that many of them happened throughout the years in China. Actually, the first 3 of them, between floods and earthquakes, China got hit pretty hard. Again, in the Southeast Asian countries as well, many things have happened there. Cyclones in Bangladesh and in India claimed almost a million people. And then more recently, naturally, we remember the Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami, right? That happened in 2004 and claimed around almost 300,000 people. And then the Haiti earthquake, of course, very close to home here, physically speaking, that claimed another 300,000 lives. Now, why do they happen? We hear these things and we start hearing so many opinions about why they happen. Some people, some churches saying, oh, it's God punishing us. That people had to be punished. Why do these things happen? Why do earthquakes happen? Anyone has heard about tectonic plates? We all have, right? Some of us in school. Gabriela is saying yes, because she had to study that, right, Gabriela? So our Earth's crust, right, is all cracked. And those little pieces of this cracked surface, they attrit next to each other. There is pressure that forms, from time to time, that pressure causes these plates to either move up and down or left and right, and that causes the earthquakes. So there's nothing abnormal about that. Physics should be able to explain 100% of it, and we know it's going to happen, but when it happens, it shocks us tremendously. But that's not God punishing anyone in particular. That's just the earth kind of adjusting itself, and naturally we live on earth and we feel the impacts. So it's part of the natural law that we have natural disasters. But again, why do they shock us, right? Why do we hear that again this or that other people are being, or nation are being punished? Some people say, well, it's the end of times, right? This is, and we are seeing more and more natural disasters, by the way, and that's true. The number of natural disasters is increasing and is going to continue to increase. But not because it's the end of times. It's because between natural adjustments and impacts that we have caused to the environment, and the environment is just giving it back to us, and now, only now we're starting to study and learn about how much impact we cause to the environment. But for many years we've done things in a way that we were unaware of the impact we were causing. So a lot of this is just a reaction from nature. So we go to Genesis, to the Genesis according to Spiritism, chapter 18, item 27. And very clearly, the spirits tell us that when, Earth is not going to be transformed by a cataclysm. Right? Very clearly, that's not how Earth is going to be transformed. Earth is going to be transformed through a gradual change. So the present generation will gradually disappear, and the new ones succeed in the same manner without anything having been changed in the natural order of things. And we hear more and more about this transformation from the spirits, from the mediumship of Eduardo through Bezerra de Menezes. That again, that is exactly a recycling, right, process, not an abrupt process. So as spirits who are no longer in alignment with the purposes of Earth, they will perhaps no longer reincarnate here. New spirits, are coming, those who are prepared, and we see more and more a spirit of fraternity being born, right? Especially when you look at our kids, for example. But then there is a question around always about when we hear about natural disasters, we hear lots of opinions, and some of the opinions, unfortunately, come from our own members of Spiritism, and sometimes they are not precise. They are opinions rather than facts or relaying of information that the spirits brought to us. So it becomes a little dangerous. So we always have to be a little careful with what we hear from other members of any church or any group, but especially Spiritism. And we hear a lot about, well, again, that was a collective expiation, right? We hear that this happened, that happened, and it was a collective expiation. And I've done some research, and there's two aspects to it. So first, that as I just said, natural disasters are natural. They're not caused by God for a purpose. It's not that God targeted a specific group of people and said, I'm going to punish that group. Because that would be a capricious God. And that cannot be God. If God would, wake up someday angry and say, I'm going to take it on you, that would not be God. So does it mean that everything happens by chance? No, it doesn't mean that either. What it means is that everything has a purpose in nature. And when a natural disaster happens, the providence takes advantage of that occurrence to bring certain things to closure. So, yes, there are collective expiations. Not that, so if you think about the tsunami, for example, or an earthquake, it's not that that earthquake was caused for that people that are there to expiate. On the contrary, that earthquake was going to happen anyways, right? Because the tectonic plates were building up pressure, and the spirits knew ahead of time, way ahead of time, that that earthquake was going to happen. So there is a process to take advantage of that earthquake to sometimes cause spirits that need to go through a similar experience to gather around that event. So we're going to talk about that. So if you, I looked up some of the references, and there are some good ones. Sueli Caldas, she talks about collective tragedies under the view of Spiritism, and she says the divine laws cause those who erred to be reunited and to go through a collective trial in order to expiate their own past errors, which their own conscience call for, sometimes many centuries after the original fact. And Divaldo Franco Also in the Spirits magazine, the second issue in English, after the Asian tsunami happened in 2004, he very carefully stated that, though I cannot prove what I'm about to say, in conversations with the spirit Joanna de Angelis, I learned that the victims were present incarnations of Alaric and his barbarians. In 410 AD, they were responsible for practically destroying Europe upon conquering Rome. Under his command, his men vandalized and burned the city for 6 very long days. Alaric died that same year. So we see a couple things here that, again, those events did not happen because of those people, but those people were gathered. As it says, their own consciences kind of brought them together because, and many, many centuries after what had originally happened. Why? Why does it happen sometimes many, many centuries after, the original situation occurred? Any guesses? Because they were not ready. So, in this case, it's a process where their own consciences become aware of what they've done, and they feel an urge to experience something that will bring closure to their souls, so that they wouldn't do this again. So it's not punishment. It's these own spirits coming to a level of awareness and realizing what they've done, and then asking to go through sometimes of a traumatic experience so that they can feel what they caused in others, so that they would never ever think about doing that again. It has to happen many years after, because the spirits were unaware. When they did what they did, the reason why they did is because they had no regard to, towards other people. They were unaware of what they were doing. So sometimes it takes many centuries for these spirits to awaken to a point where this becomes useful to them. Because you don't want a spirit to go through a situation that they don't understand, because first of all, it will be useless. The second is that they may revolt against that situation, which is even worse, and they haven't learned anything. And how many spirits look at something and their first reaction is anger, because they don't understand. So for this process to become useful, it has to be carefully orchestrated, and sometimes it will happen many, many centuries after the cause was triggered, because now they are ready. So I say this with a lot of caution, because again, we cannot pass judgment on the surface just looking at some event and say, well, it happened because of this or because of that. We don't know. We don't know. That's the reality. We know that Providence will take advantage of every occurrence to bring justice and love, and to let the natural laws happen. That much we know. But it's also important to, wow. It's also important to remember that we all are going to discarnate. It's a natural law. We all know this. So it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if a natural disaster happens or not, because we are going to pass away, either way. So as the Spirit's book, question 738b says, whether that results from a calamity or an ordinary cause, we cannot escape it when the hour of our departure has come. The only difference is that in the former case, a greater number depart at the same time. And just a greater number at the same time. As I said, only a very small fraction of the population actually is impacted by natural disasters when you talk about casualties. And as the Spirits say, if we could elevate ourselves in thought and look at this from a higher perspective, we would see that those are just, passing storms in the destiny of the world. What it means to us is that their incarnated life, that they are spared any suffering. They sometimes are disconnected many minutes before it even happens. They don't see it happening. They don't suffer anything. Others need to experience that event to its fully extent. They sometimes discarnate. They will wander through the rubble. They will stay there for a long time. Why? Because it's different for each spirit. It's what they need to experience at that point. So we can look at the general event, but we have to keep in mind that each person is going through that from its own, very own perspective. And in some cases we see suffering, in some other cases we see miracles. How many stories that we hear of things which were virtually impossible to happen, and they happen. I don't know if you remember this lady here who stayed buried in the rubble for, I think, 19 days or 17 days without water, and she survived. And you say, how come? How can she? No one can explain how she survived. Still she did. Why? I don't know. Maybe to remind us of how much life is precious and valuable. And you see people being compelled to help out of nothing. They just have that urge to help. Some people give up their jobs to go and help, and they stay in the disaster scene for days, doing everything they can, day and night, to help. So why? That's part of the grand plan that God has to us, or for us. So, we look at the individual stories, but we also look at the general story. And my interest was, why? Why do we need to go through, natural disasters? I mean, I kind of understand, but I'd like to hear more from the spirits. And they bring a wealth, as usual, they bring a wealth of perspective and wisdom. So, Kardec asks in question 737 of the Spirit's book, what is the purpose of God inflicting humankind with destructive calamities? Very simple, very simple. To impel them to progress more quickly. It may not seem to be the case, but we're going to examine this a little further, a little deeper. The Spirit says, haven't we stated that destruction is necessary for the moral regeneration of spirits? And it says that they are necessary to make things arrive at a better order more quickly and to accomplish in a few years what would have otherwise required many centuries. It's a blessing in disguise, because it does cause us to progress at a pace that, if left on its own devices, would have taken literally centuries to happen. And I'm going to show you a few things that hopefully will illustrate the point. It also complements with the question 741, may we avert these calamities? And they say, in part, yes. Especially as you acquire knowledge and experience, you become able to avert, that is, to prevent them, if you know how to study their causes. So, let's see, do we think that with resources, with knowledge, with science, can we avert the impact? We cannot avert the calamities themselves, keep that in mind. Still we can't. We cannot prevent a hurricane from happening. We cannot prevent an earthquake from happening. But we can do a lot of things to be alerted early enough and to respond quickly and to rebuild quickly. And we have two very contrasting examples when we look at Chile and Haiti, right? I mean, again, two very dramatic events that happened, two very large earthquakes. And you see a few things here. So Chile is almost double the population of Haiti. It's a much richer country than Haiti. Haiti obviously being a very, very poor country. The magnitude of the earthquake that happened in Chile, and even though in the, I think, richer scale, it was 8.8 versus 7, you think it's just 1.8 points more. It's actually, it means 500 times the force. So the Chilean earthquake was 500 times stronger than the one in Haiti. Then you look at how many structures were destroyed. Buildings, schools, houses. You had almost double the structures in Chile destroyed compared to Haiti. Look at the number of casualties. Look at the number of casualties. We had less than 1,000 people suffering in Chile despite the large number of structures compared to our brothers and sisters in Haiti, who 220,000 people lost their lives there. I think it's actually, the count is higher than that now. The point here being that with development, with resources, we actually start learning how to cope and to respond to those events. So on the one hand, we can prevent, and if we cannot prevent, we can respond. And what we've seen in Haiti is just an amazing amount of mobilization from people to help. So I was thinking about this. Haiti was basically forgotten for many, many decades. Nobody really cared about Haiti, unfortunately. The country has been living in poverty for many, many, many years. And probably it would have remained like that for many, many more years had this not happened. It's a very tragic event, very tragic. But if you see the amount of development that it's been brought to Haiti as a result, it's only been 3 years. The number of donations, the last time I checked, was well over $1 billion, which is 10% of the gross national product or domestic product. Everybody has heard about something that helped Haiti. We have our own Jean here, who so many times has reminded us and has helped organize efforts to collect donations for our brothers and sisters in Haiti. I was coming back from California 2 weeks ago for work, and from San Francisco to Miami, and on the plane, half of the plane was filled with kids and teenagers from a church that were going from California to Haiti. They all dressed with the same shirts, and they were happy. And they said, we've been doing this every year. And I meet people, you do, everybody does. We meet people every day who are volunteering their own time and money to go and help. And you can see, I saw some reports from the UN around the development that is being brought to Haiti, and so much infrastructure being built. The benefits will be seen, in years to come, but we cannot at this point comprehend the magnitude of development that is being brought to that country as a result. So it's a silver lining, is a miracle in disguise. The other thing that the Spirit told us is, as we progress, as we grow in intelligence, we will be able to, again, cope better with disaster. So I don't want to confuse anyone with this chart. So what they mean is, if you look at the last 3 or 4 or 5 decades, you can see a consistent trend of number of disasters. So the blue bar is the number of disasters. And it keeps growing, and it continues to grow. Every year you have a larger number of reported disasters, and that's not going to change because the environment, again, is responding. The number of affected people is growing too, but the number of people who are killed as a percentage of those occurrences is dramatically decreasing, because we now can be alerted early, we can respond more quickly, and we can rebuild more quickly. So this is an attestation that as time goes by, we are compelled to solve these problems. We just heard of the 3 men who gave their lives as they were chasing tornadoes, right, in the Midwest. And I don't know if anyone has been following that. So people were asking, why were they crazy? What were they doing chasing tornadoes? Well, those are scientists. And they did that because their purpose was to deploy equipment inside the tornadoes so that we could study the tornadoes, so that we could better prepare our structures and better prepare our alert systems to prevent these things. That was why they did it, not because they were chasing adventure. They were not crazy people. That's their purpose in life, was to improve everybody else's lives. So you can see that level of, what's the word? Altruism, right? In people who are giving their lives to help others in the face of natural disasters. And you see large organizations like I know it's hard to read, but the United Nations has a separate division It's called UNISDR, just to help create awareness and programs to help cope with disasters and prevent disasters. And they track, obviously, damage, people affected, and people killed. But they have a great program. It's called the UN Office dedicated to disaster risk reduction. And it's part of the Secretariat of the International Strategy for Disaster Reduction. So they have a very well-structured program now that is affecting, has 193 member states enrolled in this program to help collectively solve the problem. So you see nations coming together to try and address this. So look at how many positive things are following from disaster. You have tighter union of countries who, regardless of race, of nation, of language, they are all together trying to solve a common problem, right? So it's creating intelligence, it's bringing science together, not to be used for war, but rather to be used to helping save lives, help improve our lives. You see politicians being deeply involved because even though politicians do things just because they want to have votes, more and more this is becoming more popular, even for politicians, is to help. Of course, what can be more popular than proving that you are helping your constituents? Whoa. So again, what is really Providence's plan? And we heard about from the spirits that they do this to help us, use our intelligence to solve problems. But it's not just that. Kardec asks in question 740, couldn't calamities also be moral trials for humankind, exposing them to the most afflictive needs? And very simply, the spirits say, calamities are trials that furnish men and women with an opportunity to exert their intelligence, as we said, and to demonstrate their patience and resignation before the will of God. At the same time, it enables them to develop sentiments of self-denial, self-detachment, and love for the neighbor. So we look at the main things that are brought to us by this grand plan of God. Accelerating our development. In a few years, what would have taken many centuries. Because we now seek solutions to prevent, early detect, remedy, and reduce the impact of natural disasters. Resigning ourselves before the mighty force of nature, reminding us that we still have a long learning path, that no matter how much we think we know, there's nothing that can stop a hurricane. Nothing. It's just us bowing to nature and saying we still have to learn a lot, and we still have to learn not only how to cope with the forces of nature, but mainly reminding us that we are all here living in the same house. So the main purpose really is for me to awaken the spirit of fraternity among individuals, communities, races, and nations. So what's more, really the most fascinating aspect of these calamities is, again, the spirit of fraternity that it awakens in people. And it's becoming more and more or easier and easier for any of us to help. Before, I remember when I was a small child, so just a couple years ago, maybe 3, 4, I remember hearing about disasters in other countries, and nobody really cared. I'm sorry to say that, because there's nothing you could do. Basically, there's nothing. Right? What could you do? I was in the countryside of Brazil. I mean, something happened in China. Literally, there's nothing you could do. You could pray, and that was about it. You couldn't donate any money because there was no one to donate to. There's no one collecting donations for China. Because even if they did, how do you send it to China? You couldn't send money. There's no way you could send money. I mean, you couldn't go to a bank and say, hey, I want to donate money to China. Like, what? I mean, there's no way for them to, they don't even know who to send to. Today, it's a complete different world. With a touch of a button, you can donate from your cell phone. Like you can just text. Right? It takes no time. Literally. 5 seconds, and you donate as much money as you wish. You can donate in the form of clothing, in form of food. I mean, as we saw from Jean, it's a lot easier. I mean, today you can get on a plane and go to the place. So not only we have the means to do those things, but now we have the willing, because it's hitting home closer every time. It's our brothers and sisters. We don't think about whose nation that is, and if we agree or disagree. When disaster happens, all we think is, wow, those people need help. And that should be the first reaction. So I was reading a little bit about the myriad of miracles. I know we say there's no miracles, right, in Spiritism, but it's almost like miracles, because you see those very touching things happen, and it's unbelievable that they happen. So I decided to share a few with you before we adjourn today. So look at this, a 4-month-old girl in Japan who had been swept from her parents' arms during the tsunami in the shattered village of Ishinomaki was pulled from the rubble virtually unharmed. It's a 4-month-old baby. It's a miracle that nothing happened to the baby. And imagine the desperation of the parents, and then the joy of those parents to find her. I don't know if anyone has watched the movie Impossible. That's right, the story of 5 members of the Bennett family. That's a British family who got separated during the 2004 tsunami that hit Thailand, and miraculously survive, help others, and get reunited. Oops, did I just give away the ending of the movie? I'm so sorry. So sorry. But the story does make justice, or does do justice to the name of the movie. It's virtually impossible. You look at the movie and you say, even if it hadn't happened, if it hadn't happened and someone had written that movie, people would not have seen the movie, because you're crazy. That cannot happen. That's impossible for 5 people to go through a tsunami and then reunite alive. If it hadn't happened, people would think it was impossible. So even what happens defies reason, because it's not rational, right? Or at least not according to our human intelligence. This is for Gabi. Heroes don't just save their fellow people, though. Reiko saw a joey, a baby kangaroo, being swept by this happened in Australia in 2010 when they had floods. A fast-flowing torrent. I could just see its little head bobbing up and down, and I knew it didn't stand a chance. So I went in, and by the time I got to it, it had been hit by a log, and its eyes were the only things still out of the water. I grabbed it by the scruff of the neck and turned it over and carried it back to shore. While he was cheered by onlookers, Cole was actually threatened by arrest by police, who said that he had risked his life to save the baby animal. Still, Cole claims to have no regrets and says that the last time he saw the joey, it was being cared for and was back on its feet, literally. So people do this out of fraternity, out of just wanting to help. Why would this man do this? Why would he risk his life to save an animal? Not only people help others, not only people help themselves, but they also help themselves. This teaches us to be resilient in the face of big challenges. So these 5 women, Kat, Aiza, Nene, Nur Azmi, Nuraida, and Sulastri, lost everything when their village was hit by the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. That fateful day, Kat lost her 17-year-old granddaughter, Nene lost 7 of her 9 children, Azmi lost her parents and 3 siblings, Nuraida lost 3 of her sisters and brothers, and Sulastri lost her husband, daughter, and youngest son. All lost their homes. Everything was gone except for their indomitable spirits. After 8 weeks in a refugee camp, the 5 women decided to go home. Everybody knew the place was not livable, as we told time, but we were determined. An aid organization recognized their resolve and enrolled them in a 2-month cash for work program to clean up the village, with each woman earning $120 a month. Said Sulastri, with that money, we became real women again. And to me, this was one of the most touching stories. Again, in Australia, during the flood, a 13-year-old Jordan Rice gave his life to save his younger brother. A truck driver saw Jordan clinging to a tree as the floodwaters raged around him. He extended his hands to rescue Jordan, but Jordan pointed to his 10-year-old brother Blake and asked that Blake be rescued first. The driver listened, and while Blake was being saved, Jordan and his mother were washed away. So you see these unbelievable demonstrations of love and self-denial take place during the most aggressive, traumatic, catastrophes. And think about how much moral progress this brought to these people. How much progress they've made in one moment of complete self-denial. They will reach the other side being so much better, having made those suffering moments so worth, and leaving us with examples that hopefully will inspire us to do the same, to think about others versus thinking about ourselves. So I leave you with a few thoughts. And then one of them is that every time now that we see those catastrophes, that we see God's plan behind it. So next time we see one of these things happen, and instead of being shocked, and instead of asking why these people, why this place, let the first thought that comes to our minds be a question. And a question is, what can I do to help? Thank you.